Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Om Namo Ayariyanam. Om Namo Vajayanam. Namo Loye Savasahunam. Eso Panchanamokaro. Sarva Pavapanasano. Mangalanam cha Savesim. Padhamam Havai Mangalam. So today we're going to do Pratikraman in English. We're not following any of the other Pratikramans. We're going to do the basics and the essence of Pratikraman. In this, there are two things that I will ask from you. The first is your concentration, because you cannot do Pratikraman if you're daydreaming, thinking about yesterday's lunch and tomorrow's breakfast. And the second is when we say Michami Dukram, you have to say Michami Dukram, but with full bhav. Bhav is everything in Pratikraman. If you're saying sorry to somebody, if you're asking for forgiveness, you have to do it wholeheartedly. If you do it with your thoughts and somewhere else and absent-mindedly, it has little value. Okay? So, Pratikraman is a very ancient tradition, and it's in a book called Avashak Sutra. And Avashak means essential. So these are the essential things that we should all do every day. And the Pratikraman we do today is called Devsi, or for the day. So we are going to look at all the things that we may have done wrong today and say Michami Dukran for them. The last one is a Samvat means year. So that is the year-long Pratikraman for everything you've done over the year. And as Jains, it is considered mandatory that we should do that, because to move forward spiritually, we must clean our slate of everything we've done in the past. Okay, so we'll start this with the first Avashak, which is Samaik. So Samaik is the vow of equanimity. And we will say for 2 gharis, 48 minutes, we will be in equanimity. We won't talk, we won't move around, and our minds will not wander. They will be focused and we will concentrate. Okay, so I have Jayshree Faiba with me. She's my Faiba, but she can be all your Faiba as well. And she's going to recite the original scripture. I'm going to translate for you. The reason we do it like this is so that if you ever go to one of the others, you will at least recall some of the things that are said in the original scripture. So we'll start with the simple vow of Samaik, and then we'll move to the second Avashak.
દ્રવ્ય થકી સાવચોક સેફરના પચકામ ક્ષેત્ર થકી આખા લોક પ્રમાણે કાળ થકી 2 ઘડી ઉપરાંત ન પાડું ત્યાં સુધી અને ન પડાવું ત્યાં સુધી છકોટીએ પચકાણે કરમી પંતે સમયમ સાવચોક પચકામી ચાઉ નિયમ પચવા સામી દુવેન તેવેણમ ન કરેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા તસ્સ પંતે પડિકમામી નિંદામી તધિયામી અપાણાંગ સિરામી.
So now that we have taken a vow of Samaik and said that we will be in full concentration, the next thing we have to do is thank those that have given us this knowledge, the 24 Tirthankars. And we do that, and that is called Chovisanto. So for the 24 Tirthankars, we have to bow down and thank them for and praise them for the knowledge that they have given us. So to do that, we will all say Logos together. Atithaya regine, arihante kita hisam, chovisampi kevali, usabhamajiyam cha vande, sambhavam abhinandanam cha sumayam cha paham, supasam jiram cha chanda pahavande, suviyam cha pufadantam, siyalasi jam cha vasupujam cha, vimalamanantam cha jinam, dhammam sanktim cha vandami, kuntumaram cha malli, vande muni suvayami jinam cha, vandami rithanemi, vasantaha vadhamanam cha, evam maye abhitua, viyurai mahina jara marana, chovisampi jinavara, tithayara me pasiyamtu, kitiya vandiya maya, je logasa uttama siddha, aruga bohi labham, samai varamutamadintu, chandesu nimalayara, aichesu aiham payasahara, sagarvara gambira, siddha siddhi mamadi santu. So now that we have paid our respects to the Tirthankars, the next thing is the people who help us understand the teachings of the Tirthankars, and these are the gurus. So we do Vandana to gurus, and we will do 3 Vandanas, saying Tikhuto 3 times.
Tikhuto ayahinam payahinam vandami namanswami satkaremi sammaremi kalyanam mangalam devyam chevyam pachvasami. Tikhuto ayahinam payahinam vandami namanswami satkaremi sammaremi kalyanam mangalam devyam chevyam pachvasami.
Maten Vandami.
Tikhuto ayahinam payahinam vandami namanswami satkaremi sammaremi kalyanam mangalam devyam chevyam pachvasami.
So now we've done Samaik, Jovisanto, and Vandana, the 3 things you have to do before you can do Pratikraman. So number 4 is Pratikraman, and what we will do is Jai Shri Faiba will start reading the verses, and I will then explain them in English. So the Jain path to moksha, which is the purpose, the entire purpose of Jainism, is made up of 3 things: your knowledge, Gnan, your perception or your darshan, and your conduct or your charitra. And what Pratikraman does is goes through all of these to make sure that any mistakes in any of them you recognize and you say Michami Dukram. But the other purpose of this is that you should also pay attention so that you understand what is considered a mistake in any of these. So by going through every single one, you will see what is right and wrong, and then if you have done anything wrong, say Michami Dukram with us.
જ્ઞાનના અતિચાર દિવસ સમયથી જ્ઞાન દર્શન ચારિત્ર અને તપને વિશે જે અતિચાર લાગ્યા હોય તે આલોવું છું. આગમે તિવિહે પન્નતે તંજા સુતગમે અથગમે તદુપયાગમે એવા શ્રી જ્ઞાની વિશે જે અતિચાર લાગ્યા હોય તે આલોચ્યું. તમ વાયમ તમ વચામેલિયમ હેણ કખર અચકખર પયહીણમ વિયણહીણમ જોગહીણમ ઘોષહીણમ સુઠુદીઠમ દુઠ પરિચયમ અકાલે કહો સચાવો કાલે ન કહો સચાવો અસચાએ સચાએ સચાએ ન સચાએ એમ ભણતા ગણતા ચિંતવતા 14 પ્રકારે કોઈ પાપ દોષ રાખ્યો હોય તો અરિયંત અનંત સિદ્ધ ભગવાનની સાક્ષી તસ્સમિચ્છામિ દુગ્રા.
So this is the faults in attaining knowledge. So while studying, learning, contemplating in any of the 14 ways that have been sustained, I am repenting for whatever blemishes have occurred on this day on my knowledge, faith, character, and worship. Sutras are said to be of 3 types. They are the principal scriptures, the 32 additional scriptures, and ones that have both. If in reading these I have made any of the following mistakes, I have recited unattentively, omitted necessary words, I've included words that were not necessary, I've omitted verses, I have recited them disrespectfully, I have recited them with a mind that is not steady, or speech, or body, recited without correct pronunciation, I have given knowledge to a person who is not worthy, I have disrespectfully or arrogantly gained knowledge, I have recited at improper times or improper places, or I have not recited at the proper times and in the proper places. If I have done any of these, then tasmichami dukram.
દર્શન સમકિત્વ દર્શનમ સંકિત પરમથ સંથો વાવી સુદીઠ પરમથ સેવણા વાવી ગાવન કુદર્શન વચરણા સમ્મત સધરણા એવા સંકિતના સમણોવાસેણમ સમ્મત પંચયારા પેયારા જાણિયા ન સમાયરા કંજાતે અલૌ શંકા કંકા વિતિકચ્છા પરપાસન પંસસા પરપાસન સંથો એમ સંકિત રૂપ રત્નની વિશે મિથ્યાત્વ રૂપ રજ મેલ દોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો અરિહંત અનંત સિદ્ધ ભગવાનની સાક્ષીએ તસ્સમિચ્છામિ દુગ્રા.
So next we move to faith. True faith towards God, Guru, and religion of the highest truth, to realize on one's own the highest truth, to serve and associate with others, and also to look at those that have deserted after getting enlightenment, who have abandoned the wrong path, taken the path of hypocrites, only to keep faith in religion that is true, and have such true faith that a devotee should have towards those that have the true faith. I will not do the following: to doubt the true faith, to desire the opinions of those that are hypocrites, to doubt the benefits of doing holy deeds, to appreciate the opinion of those that are hypocrites, and to associate with them. If I have done any of the above, then tasmichami dukkaram.
હવે શ્રાવકના 12 વ્રત. પહેલું અણુવ્રત થુલાવો પાણાઈ વાયાઓ વેરમણમ તસ્ય જીવ બેન્દ્રિય તેન્દ્રિય ચોવેન્દ્રિય પચેન્દ્રિય જીવ છાણી પ્રીક્ષી સ્વસંબંધી શરીર માહેલી પીડાકારી સ અપરાધી વિકલેન્દ્રિય વિના આકુટી હણવા નિમિત્તે હણવાના પચકાણ તથા સૂક્ષ્મ એકંદ્રિય પણ હણવાના પચકાણ જાવ જીવાએ દુભીમ તિવેણમ ન કરીમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા પહેલા ધૂપ પ્રાણાતિપાત વેરમણમ વ્રતના પંચ અયારા પેયાલા જાણિયા ન સમાય રહ્યા તંજાતે અલો બંદે વયે છવિચયે અયભારે પત્ત પાણ ઓછયે એવા પહેલા વ્રતની વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપ દોષ રાખ્યા હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ દુગ્રા.
So now we move to conduct, and the conduct is the 12 vows of a Shravak. Now, even if you don't follow the vows, these are the moral guidance that you should all be following to the best of your ability. So the first vow is the vow of gross violence towards life. I refrain from violence towards lives that move around, souls that have two senses, that is touch and taste, like worms or other shells, souls that have three senses, touch, taste, and smell, like ants and lice, souls with four senses, touch, taste, smell, and vision, like fleas and bees, souls with all five senses, touch, taste, smell, vision, and hearing, like animals and people. These living beings, to own or to have from somebody who owns, to inflict pain on their bodies, to offend them in any way, and to deliberately or intentionally kill them, I vow not to kill even the smallest of these organisms as long as I live, by two acts and three means: by doing or asking others to do, by doing it physically, by speech, or in my mind. I do not kill, and I will ask others not to kill. And such violence towards these lives I will refrain from, knowing that I will not tie these animals or life with cords or sticks. I will not beat them. I will not pierce them. I will not put weight on them, and I will not deprive them of food or water or have any evil intention towards them. If I have done any such thing, then tasmichami Bikram.
બીજું અનુવ્રત ફુલાવો મુસાયાવાયાઓ વેરમણમ કન્નાલિક ગોવાલિક ભૂમાલિક થાપણ મોસો મોટકી કુડી શાક ઇત્યાદિક મોટકું જુઠ્ઠું બોલવાના પચખાણ જાવ જીવાએ દુભીમ તિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કારવેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા બીજા થુલ મૃષાવાદ વેરમણમ વ્રતના પંચ અયાર્યા જાણિયા ન સમાયરા તંજાતે આલવું સહસ પખણે રહસ પખણે સદાર મંતપે એ મોસોવએ કુગ એ કરણે એવા બીજા થુલ બીજા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપદોષ રાખ્યો હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ ગુણમ.
The second vow is the vow of not telling gross lies. So I refrain from saying gross lies, lies that pertain to brides to be, to animals, regarding land or other possessions, speaking lies with the intention of not returning somebody's belongings, lying by being a false witness for a major event, and any other such gross lies for as long as I live, either not doing myself or asking others to do through mind, speech, or body, in that I will not say things that are shocking or alarming, reveal somebody's confidentiality, reveal the secrets of one's husband or wife, preaching something I know is false, writing something that I know is false. If I have done any of these things, then tasmichami Bikram.
ત્રીજું અનુવ્રત ફુલાવો અદીના દાણાઓ વેરમણમ ખાતર ખણી ગાંઠડી છોડી ટાળો પર કૂચવી કરી બડી વસ્તુ ધણિયાથી છાણી ઇત્યાદિક મોટકું અદાતાદાન લેવાના પચખાણ સગા સંબંધી તથા વ્યાપાર સંબંધી ન ભરમી વસ્તુ ઉપરાંત અદાતાદાન લેવાના પચખાણ જાવ જીવાએ દુભીમ તિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કારવેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા ત્રીજા થૂલ અદાતાદાન વેરમણ વ્રતના પંચ અયરા જાણિયા ન સમાયરા તંજાતે આલો તેના તળે તકર ભોગે વિરુદ્ધ રજાઈ કમે કુટતોલે કુડમાણે તપડી યુગ બબારે એવા ત્રીજા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપદોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ ગુણમ.
The third vow is of stealing or gross theft. I refrain from stealing other people's treasure, opening other people's packages, opening somebody's lock using another key, knowingly take belongings that belong to other people. Apart from things of insignificant value, I shall not take anything without permission as long as I live, either by doing or asking others to do, and in mind, thought, and deed, I will not take goods that I know are stolen. I will not help a thief. I will not do anything against the law of the country. I will not use wrong weights and measures in my trade. If I have done any of these things, then tasmichami Bikram.
ચોથું અણુવ્રત થુલાવો મેહુણાઓ વેરમણમ સદા સંતોષીએ એવ સસણમ મેહુણ વિહિના પચકાણ અને જે સ્ત્રી પુરુષને મૂળ થકી કાયા કરી મેહુણ સેવાના પચકાણ હોય તેને દેવતા મનુષ્ય તિર્યક સંબંધી મેહુણ સેવાના પચકાણ જાવ જીવાએ દેવતા સંબંધી દુહિમ તિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા મનુષ્ય તિર્યક સંબંધી એક વિહણમ ન કરેમી કાયસા એવા ચોથા થુલ મેહુણ વેરમણ વ્રતના પંચયારા જાણ્યા ન સમાયરા તંજાતે આલવું ઇતરીય પરિગ્રાગમણે અપરિગ્રાગમણે અનંત પીડા પર વિવાહકરણે કામભોગે સુતીવા પિલાસા એવા ચોથા વ્રતની વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપદોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો તત્સમીક્ષામિ દુઃખદં.
So the fourth vow is the vow of gross sensuality. And it says, I refrain from and be contented with my own husband or wife, and not with anybody else other than him or her. Sensual pleasures are forbidden outside of this for as long as I live. I will not do such acts, and I will not get those acts done by mind, speech, or body. And that includes with any other type of being. Any such thing that leads to sensuality, I vow to give up. I will not have marital relations with a husband or wife of immature age, have premarital relations, have perverse relations, take unconcerned interest in getting others married, being obsessive towards sensualism. If I have committed any of the above, then tasmichami dukram.
પાંચમું અણુવ્રત થુલાવો પરિગાહો વેરમણમ કેતવતુ યથા પરિણામ હીણ સુવર્ણનું યથા પરિણામ ધન ધાન્યનું યથા પરિણામ દુપદ ચૌપદનું યથા પરિણામ કુવ્યનું યથા પરિણામ એ યથા પરિણામ કીધું છે તે ઉપરાંત પોતાનો પરિગ્રહ કરી રાખવાના પચકાણ જાવ જીવાએ એક વિહમ તિવેણમ ન કરેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા પાંચમા તુલ પરિગ્રહ વેરમણમ વ્રતના પંચ અયારા જાણ્યા ન સમાયરા તંજા ત્યાલવું ખેતવતુ પ્રમાણે કમણે હીણ સુવર્ણ પ્રમાણે કમણે ધન ધાન્ય પ્રમાણે કમણે દુપદ ચૌદ પ્રમાણે કમણે કુવ્ય પ્રમાણે કમણે એવા પાંચમા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપદોષ રાખ્યા હોય તો તત્સમીક્ષામિ દુઃખદં.
So the fifth vow is of possession, parigraha. Surplus material belongings I will refrain from, including open land like fields or farms or houses, enclosed spaces, whatever the limit that I set for silver, for gold, whatever I set for money, for food provisions, whatever I set for owning animals, for owning belongings in a house, whatever I set, and within such limits, I will not accumulate wealth over and above that limit as long as I live, either by myself or asking others to, through mind, speech, or body. I will not cross these limits of open land or enclosed spaces. I will not cross the limits of silver or gold, of cash or other types of money, for animals, for house contents. If I have done any such thing today, then tasmichami dukram.
છઠ્ઠો દિશે વ્રત ઉઠો દિશેનું યથા પરિણામ અહો દિશેનું યથા પરિણામ તિર્ય દિશેનું યથા પરિણામ એ યથા પરિમાણ કીધું છે તે ઉપરાંત સ ઈચ્છાએ કાયાએ જઈને પાંચ આશ્રવ સેવાના પચખાણ જાવ જીવાએ દુહિન તિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા છઠ્ઠા દિશે વેરફણ વ્રતના પંચ અયારા જાણ્યા ન સમાયરા તંજા તે અલવું ઉઠ્ઠો દિશી પ્રમાણે કમણે અહો દિશી પ્રમાણે કમણે તિર્ય દિશી પ્રમાણે કમણે કેતવ ઉઠે સય અંતરધાય એવા છઠ્ઠા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપદોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો તત્સમીક્ષામિ દુઃખદં.
So the sixth anuvrat is to try and limit your activities within the six directions, because the further you go, the more you have an opportunity to cause more violence. So it says with the five vows that I've just said, limit them in the upward direction, downward direction, limit them in all the other four directions, east, west, north, and south, And having set such limits, not to cross them willingly or physically, not to commit the 5 evils of ahimsa, lies, theft, sensuality, and greed, I forbid myself as long as I live, either by myself or asking others through mind, speech, and body, not to do any of these in any of the 6 directions. But if I have done any of that, then tasmichami dukram.
સાતમું વ્રત ઉપભોગ પરિભોગ ભોગવિહીન પચખાણે માણે પહેલે બોલે ઉલણ વિહાર બીજે દંતર વિહાર ત્રીજે ફલ વિહીન ચોથે અપગણ વિહીન પાંચમે ઉવટણ વિહીન છઠ્ઠે મજ્જણ વિહીન સાતમે બત્તર વિહી આઠમે વિલેવણ વિહીન નવમે પુફ વિહી દસમે આભરણ વિહી 11મે ધૂપ વિહી 12મે પૈચ વિહીન 13મે પખણ વિહી 14મે ઓદણ વિહી 15મે સુપ વિહી 16મે વિગય વિહી 17મે સાગ વિહીન 18મે માહુરય વિહીન 19મે જેમણ વિહી 20મે બાણીય વિહી 21મે મુહવાસ વિહી 22મે વાહણ વિહીન 23મે ઉવાહણ વિહીન 24મે સયણ વિહીન 25મે સચિત વિહીન 26મે દભ વિહીન ઇત્યાદિકનું યથા પરિણામ કીધું છે. તે ઉપરાંત ઉપભોગ પરિભોગ ભોગ નિમિત્તે ભોગવવાના પચખાણ જાવ જીવાએ એક વિહમ તિવેણમ ન કરેમી મણસા પૈસા કાયસા એવા સાતમા ઉપભોગ પરિભોગ દુવ્યમ પનતે તંજા પૂર્ણાવુએ કમયુએ ભોયણાવું સમળો વાસેણમ પંચયારા જાણ્યા ન સમાયેલા તંજા તે આલવું સચિત હારે સચિત પડી બત્તા હારે અપલો હી સોહી પખણાએ રૂપલો હી સહી પખણાએ તુચ્છો સહી પખણાએ કમ એણમ સમળો વાસેણમ પન્ન રસ કમા દાણાયમ જાણ્યા ન સમાયેલા તંજા તે આલવું ઇંગાલ કમે વણ કમે સાડી કમે પાડી કમે ફોડી કમે દંત વાણી જાય કેસ વાણી જાય રસ વાણી જાય લખ વાણી જાય વિસ્સ વાણી જાય જંત પીલણ કમે નીલક્ષણ કમે દગ્ગ દિગવણિયા સરતઃ તલાગ પરિસોયણા અસહ્ય જણ પોષણ્યા એવા સાતમા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી ભોજનના 5 અતિચાર અને 15 કર્માદાન સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપદોષ રાખ્યા હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ.
The 7th vow is the vow of limiting what you consume to limit the impact you have on the environment. So this includes articles that you can only use once, like food and water, and things that you can use time and again, like clothes, jewelry, and household goods. So you take a vow to restrict or fix the number of these things that you try and use on a daily basis. This includes cloths used to wipe the body, like towels and napkins, used to for beauty or cleansing products, for consumption of fruit, for use of oils and lotions. Restrict the use of beauty products. Limit the quantity of bathing products, the number of clothes or garments that you have, the use of cosmetics, the use of flowers, the use of ornaments, the use of incense material, consumption of beverages like tea and coffee. Restrict the consumption of sweets. Limit the types of fruit grains, the type of pulses, the types of the nutrients like ghee, oil, jaggery, milk, yogurt, green vegetables, the use of sweets, the number of items you have in your daily diet, to consume limited quantities of water, to consume limited quantities of mouth freshener, limit the number of cars or other vehicles, of footwear, of beds and mattresses, the use of things that are animate, like fruits with seeds, unboiled water. Limit the use of any other object that you consume regularly. And you will not do them yourself or ask others to do it for you, or through mind, speech, or body. You will not consume things that are animate or living. And if it's not living, but it is like a living thing, then you shall not consume it. If you have consumed something that is partially cooked, have consumed something which has been cooked in a very cruel way, or consume something that there is less to eat and more to throw away, like sugarcane or custard apple, related to your business or your trade, the 15 activities that are considered sinful are trades in which furnaces are used, like a blacksmith, to cut trees from the forest, i.e. in the timber trade, to trade in fermented goods like liquor or beer, to realize money by the way of rent for things like houses or vehicles, digging the earth to construct wells, lakes, or other objects, to trade in bones, ivory, or horns, to trade in fur, to trade in meat, honey, butter, fat, liquor, to trade in sealing wax, to deal in poisonous and toxic substances, to manufacture things by crushing, like sugar or oil, to torture animals, like piercing their limbs, to set fire to forests, fields, etc., to empty lakes, to consume or look at carnivorous animals, slaves of man in your livelihood. If you have done any of the above, then tasmichami dukram.
આઠમું વ્રત અનર્થ દંડનું વેરમણમ ચૌરિયાએ અણથા દંડે પન્નતે તંજા અવઝાણમ ચરિયમ પમાયચરિયમ હિંસપયાણમ પાવકમો અવસરમ એવા આઠમા અનર્થ દંડ સેવાના પચકાણ જાવ જીવાએ દુવેમ તિવેણમ ન કરીમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા આઠમા અનર્થ દંડ વેરમણમ વ્રતના પંચયારા જણિયા ન સમાયરા ધંજા તે આલવું કંદપે કુકુએ મોહરીએ સંજુતાહે ગરણે ઉભુક પરિભુક ઐરતે એવા આઠમા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપ દોષ લાગ્યા હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ.
So the eighth vow is a vow of refraining from unnecessary violence, which penalizes your soul but has no benefit to you. This includes evil concentration, so thinking about harming other people, thinking about how you yourself have been harmed or treated in a bad way, having reluctance to do things that are right, to possess weapons that are deadly, to preach things that you know are sinful. If you have done any of these acts, which are purposeless, by either yourself or asking others to do, through mind, speech, or body, then if they include speech using words which increase passions, perform gestures that you know are bad, speak things that are careless and meaningless but harm others, collect things that are weapons and can be used for deadly means, and you have excess attachment to consumer items that increase your possession. If you have done any of these things, then tasmichami dukram.
નવમું સામાયિક વ્રત સાવજોગનું પેરમણમ જાવ નિયમ ભજવા સામે દુવિયમ તિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવી મારી તમારી સદવણા પરુ પ્રમાણે કરી સામાયિકનો અવસર આવે અને સામાયિક કરીએ તે વારે સ્પર્શાય કરી શુદ્ધ હોજો એવા નવમા સામાયિક વ્રતના પંચ અયારા જાણ્યા ન સમાયેરા તંજાતે અલવું મંતુપ્રિયાએ વૈતુપ્રિયાએ કાયતુપ્રિયાએ સામાયસ અકરણાએ સામાયસ અણવટીય સકરણાએ એવા નવમા સામાયિક વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપ દોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ દુક્કડમ.
So the ninth vow is the vow to make sure that your samaik, which is what you're doing now, is done properly and correctly. So it says, I refrain from sinful acts and I remain in a composed way within the limits and boundaries that I have set, and I will do this myself, and I will not ask others to do for me through mind, speech, and body. Of this vow of samaik, I will not employ my mind in a way that is foul. I will have not used language that is foul. I will have not done anything else that is wrong. I will not do my samaik negligently or carelessly. I will not terminate the samaik before its actual completion time. If I have done any of these, then tasmichami dukkaram.
10મું દેશાવગસિક વ્રત દીપ પ્રત્યે પ્રભાત થકી પ્રારંભીને પૂર્વાધિક 6 દિશી જેટલી ભૂમિકા મોકળી રાખી છે. તે ઉપરાંત ઈચ્છાએ કાયાએ જઈને 5 આશ્રવ સેવાના પચકાણ જાવ અહોરંતમ દ્વિણમ ત્રિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા જેટલી ભૂમિકા મોકળી રાખી છે. તે માહે દ્રવ્યાદિકની જે મર્યાદા કીધી છે તે ઉપરાંત ઉભોગ પરિભોગ ભોગ નિમિત્તે ભોગવવાના પચકાણ જાવ અહોરંતમ એક વિહમ ત્રિવેણમ ન કરેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવા 10મા દેશાવગસિક વ્રતના પંચ અયારા જાણિયા ન સમાયરા તંજાતે આલવો આણવણ પોગે પેસવણ પોગે સદાણું વાયે રૂવાણું વાયે બહ્યા પોગલ પખવે એવા 10મા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ મધ્યે જે કોઈ પાપ દોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો તત્સમીક્ષા.
So the 10th vow says that if you have taken a vow to limit your activity, then from the dawn of the day that you do it, in all 6 directions, whatever limits that you have set in terms of your physical and mental limits, you're forbidden to ask for something which exists outside of those limits. You cannot call or send someone to get things for you which are outside. You cannot summon somebody else who is outside of your limits. You cannot convey to somebody outside of the limits by means of hand and other gestures. And you cannot attract their attention by throwing a pebble or through some other way. If you have set such limits and you have broken them, then tasmichami dukram.
11મું પરિપૂર્ણ પૌષધ વ્રત અષાઢમ પાણમ ખાયમ સાયમના પચકાણ અભગના પચકાણ મણિ સુવર્ણના પચકાણ માલા બરગણના વિલેવણના પચકાણ સત્ત મુસ્લાદિક સાવજ જોગના પચકાણ જાવ અહોરંતમ પજવા સામે દુહિમ ત્રિવેણમ ન કરેમી ન કાર્વેમી મણસા વૈસા કાયસા એવી મારી તમારી સદુણા પરુપ્રમાણે કરી પૌષધનો અવસર આવે અને પૌષધ કરું તે વારે સ્પર્શનાય કરી શુદ્ધ હોજો. એવા 11મા પરિપૂર્ણ પૌષધ વ્રતના પંચ અયારા જાણિયા ન સમાયરા તંજાતે આલવો अपनी लही दुपड़ी लही सिज्जा संथा रहे अपमंजन दुपमंजन सिज्जा संथा रहे अपनी लही दुपड़ी लहे उच्चार पासवण भूमि अपमंजन दुपमंजन उच्चार पासवण भूमि पोसह समम अणुणा पायणा एवा 11મા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ સંબંધી જે કોઈ પાપ દોષ લાગ્યા હોય તો તત્સમીક્ષા.
The 11th vow of Poshad Vrat is the vow to take the vows of a sadhu for one day to nourish your soul, and that means that you abstain from food, water, dry fruits, and other eatables, that you give up sensuality for the day, you give up jewelry, you give up flowers, garlands, and cosmetics, you give up all instruments and weapons that you may be using. For one day and for one night you will do this, and you will not, either yourself or through others, through mind, speech, or body, do the things that are blemishes. Make your bed carelessly without looking for living beings, not sweeping the place before making a bed or sweeping it carelessly. You will stay in a place and dispose of any waste properly and not do it carelessly. You will not leave the place unclean and will have swept it carefully. If you have not followed this Poshad Vrat correctly, then tasmichami dukaram.
12મું અતિથિ સંવિભાગ વ્રત સમણે નિકથે ફાસુયણમ એસેજણમ અસણમ પાણમ ખાયમ સાયમ વત્ત પડિગ કંબલ પાયપુચ્છયણમ પાઢ્યારુ પીઠ ફલક સિચા સંથારયણમ મોસહ ભેષજણમ પડીલા પ્રમાણે વિહરીએ અસેમ એવા મારી તમારી સદુણા પરુ પ્રમાણે કરી સુપાત્ર સાધુ સાધ્વીજીની જોગવાઈ મળે અને નિર્દોષ આહાર પાણી વોરાવું તે વારે સ્પર્શનાય કરી શુદ્ધ હોજો. એવા 12મા અતિથિ સમવિભાગ વ્રતના પંચ અયારા જાણિયા ન સમાયરા તંજાતે આલવું સચ્ચિત નિખલાવણે સચ્ચિત પ્રેહણાએ કાલાઈ કમે પરોવસે મચ્છરિયાએ એવા 12મા વ્રતને વિશે આજના દિવસ અંતે જે કોઈ પાપ દોષ રાખ્યો હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ દુક્કડમ.
So the 12th vow is Atithi Samvibhag. Atithi means somebody who comes unannounced to your door. Typically, this is a Jain sadhu, but it can be any deserving person. The virtue of sharing with such people, and you should be keen to desire it, whether they are religious people who have renounced everything, offer them things that are inanimate, that is, have no life, that is cooked, water that is inanimate, sweetmeats, mouth fresheners, simple clothes, wooden pots and utensils, blankets, woolen brushes, wooden benches or beds, a place to spread a mattress or the mattress itself, medicine, or any of the above. You should give these devotedly and you should cherish such a desire. You should not mix things that are living with things that are not living whilst you're giving. You should not cover something that is living by something that is not living to hide it. You should not give something that you know is spoilt, stale, or fermented. You should not ask others to give despite being in a position to give yourself. You should not be unduly proud after donating these things. If you have done any such sin, then tasmichami dukram. Yeah.
18 પાપ સ્થાનક સંબંધી પાપ દોષ લાગ્યા હોય તે આલવું છું. પહેલી બોલે પ્રાણાતિપાત, બીજે મૃષાવાદ, ત્રીજે અદાતાદાન, ચોથે મૈથુન, પાંચમે પરિગ્રહ, છઠ્ઠી ક્રોધ, સાતમે માન, આઠમે માયા, નવમે લોભ, દસમે રાગ, 11મે દ્વેષ, 12મે કલહ, 13મે અભ્યાખ્યાન, 14મે પશુન્ય, 15મે પરપરિવાદ, 16મે રઈ અરઈ, 17મે માયા મોસો, 18મે મિચ્છા દસરણમ સલ્લમ. એ 18 પ્રકારના પાપ સ્થાનક મારા જીવે તમારા જીવે સેવ્યા હોય, સેવરાવ્યા હોય, સેવતા પ્રત્યે અનુમોદન કર્યું હોય તો અનંતાશ્રિત કેવડી ભગવાનની સાક્ષી તસ્સમિચ્છામિ દુક્કડમ.
So now we'll recite the 18 types of activities that are sinful. Firstly, violence towards life. Secondly, to lie, to steal, which is defined as taking something without permission. Fourth is to be unchaste. Fifth is worldly attachment, anger, pride, cunning, greed, attachment. Hatred or spite, to quarrel, to falsely allege or accuse somebody, to gossip, to criticize or backbite, to be happy in doing sinful acts and to be unhappy when you're doing religious acts, to lie maliciously, to trust a God that is false, or a guru that is false, or a religion you know to be false. If you have done any of these 18 sinful acts, then tasmichami dukkaram.
25 પ્રકારના મિથ્યાત્વ સંબંધી પાપ દોષ લાગ્યા હોય તે આલવું છું. પહેલી બોલે અભિગ્રાહિક મિથ્યાત્વ, બીજે અનાભિગ્રાહિક મિથ્યાત્વ, ત્રીજે અભિનિવેશક મિથ્યાત્વ, ચોથે સાંશિક મિથ્યાત્વ, પાંચમે અણાભોગ મિથ્યાત્વ, છઠ્ઠે લૌકિક મિથ્યાત્વ, સાતમે લોકોત્તર મિથ્યાત્વ, આઠે કૃપાવચન મિથ્યાત્વ, નવમે જીવને અશિવ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, દસમે અજીવને જીવ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 11મે સાધુને કુસાધુ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 12મે કુસાધુને સાધુ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 13મે 8 કર્મથી મુકાણા તેને નથી મુકાણા તે શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 14મે 8 કર્મથી નથી મુકાણા તેને મુકાણા શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 15મે ધર્મને અધર્મ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 16મે અધર્મને ધર્મ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 17મે જીન માર્ગને અન્ય માર્ગ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 18મે અન્ય માર્ગને જીન માર્ગ શતે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 19મે જીન માર્ગથી ઓછું પ્રરૂપે તે મિથ્યાત્વ, 20મે જીન માર્ગથી અધિક પ્રરૂપે તે મિથ્યાત્વ 21મે જીન માર્ગથી વિપરીત પ્રવૃત્તિ તે મિથ્યાત્વ 22મે અવિનય મિથ્યાત્વ 23મે અકિરિયા મિથ્યાત્વ 24મે અજ્ઞાન મિથ્યાત્વ 25મે અશાતાના મિથ્યાત્વ આ 25 પ્રકારનું મિથ્યાત્વ મારા જીવે તમારા જીવે સેવ્યું હોય સેવરાવ્યું હોય સેવતા પ્રત્યે અનુમોદન કર્યું હોય તો તસ્સમિચ્છામિ.
We now look at the 25 types of beliefs that are wrong. So the first is to stubbornly support what you know to be false without discrimination of true or false. To believe in all gods and all gurus, whether they are good or bad. To insist on personal opinions, even though you know that they are false. To have a suspicious nature towards the true religion and rightful acts. To be happy in absolute ignorance. To believe in such gurus or gods which are in contradiction with the true religion, and also to recognize and celebrate their festivals or holy occasions. To worship the Tirthankars, but only with selfish motives. To agree with the opinions of those that are hypocritical. To consider the living as non-living. To consider what is non-living as living. To consider somebody who is a sadhu as not a sadhu. To consider somebody who is not a sadhu as a sadhu. To consider those that are liberated as unliberated. To consider things that are unliberated as liberated. To consider what is holy as unholy. To consider what is unholy as holy. To consider the path of Jainism the same as any other path. To consider any other path as the path of Jainism. To understate the facts of Jainism. To overstate the facts of Jainism. To state facts that are contrary to the facts of Jainism. To disrespect your elders, gurus, and sadhus. To disbelieve in the practices of religion. To glorify ignorance. To behave badly with your elders, gurus, and sadhus. Out of these 25 wrong beliefs, if I have committed any of them, asked others to commit them, or consented with those that are committing them, then may all my sins be dissolved. Tasmichami Dukkadam. So that ends the fourth essential of Pratikraman. The fifth essential is Kausag. So Kausag is a form of meditation where you should focus on your soul, focus inside, and reflect on the Pratikraman you have just done. So to do Kausag, Jayashree Fadla will recite four Logos Sutra. And if you can all sit up, keep your spine straight, your eyes softly shut, your hands in your lap, and we'll start.
नमो रियंताणं नमो सिताणं नमो अयनं नमो वचाय नमो लोय सप्त सावंते कुतो अयनं कयानं वन्दामिनं स्वामी सकारिमि समानमि कलानं मंगलं देव्यं चैव्यं पुजवासामि इच्छामि परिकमो इरिया वीर्या कमणा कमणे पाण कमणे बिय कमणे हरिय कमणे सावतरण पंगदक मटी मकड़ा संतान संकमणे चेमे जीवा विरहिया एकिंद्या पेंद्या त्रिंद्या चोइंद्या पचिंद्या अपिया वत्या लेस्या संगा संकट्या पर्याविर्या केलामिया उदविया ठाणा उठाणा संकामिया जीव्या वहर्या तस्समिच्छामि तुक्रम तस्सौत्रीकरणं पायचित्करणं विसोयीकरणं विस्लीकरणं पावणं कमाणं निगायंठाय ठामी कावसग अनंत उसस्यणं निसस्यणं खास्यणं चेणं जंबायणं गुडियणं वाहिनी सगणं अम्मलिये पिकुचाय सुमे संचाले सुमे खेल संचाले सुमे दिति संचाले एवं मई अगरे उजुमे कावसगो जाव अरियंताणं भगवंताणं न करेमी न कार्यमी ताव कणं ठाणं मोणं जाणं अप्पाणं वसिरामी चार लोकसनो कावसग करावुं છું लोक सौजे करे तमति थायरे चेणी अर्यंते कितेसी 24 केवली उसपमचंच वंदे संपवमपिनंच सुमंच पमप सुपासं च जीवं च चदप वंदे सुवेंच पुफ्तंत सियल सिंचन सवासुपचंच विमल म्हणत तमं संति च वंदामि कुन्तु अरञ्चमल्ली वन्दामि रिठनेमि पासन्तवत्मानं च एवमये अपितु आविहुरयमला पैणचरणा चौविसम्पि चिणुरा तिथैरामे पश्यन्तु कितीय वन्दे मया जयलोकसुत्मा सितारुक बोहिलापं समायवर्मुत्तं दिन्तु चन्देषु निमलयरायचि स्वयं पयासैरा सागरवर्कम्भिरा सिद्धा सिद्धि मम दिसन्तु लोकसौचकरे तमतिथैरे चीणेर्यन्ते कितैसि चौविसम्पि केवली उसभमज्यं च वन्दे सम्भवम् अभिनन्दं च सुमयं च पमप सुपासं च चिणं च चन्दपा वन्दे सूयं च पफ्तन्त सियलसिञ्जन् स वासुपूजं च विमलमणन्ततमं सन्ति च वन्दामि कुन्तु अरञ्चमल्ली वन्दामि रिटनेमि पासन्तः वर्तमानं च एव मय्यपि त्वा विहुरैमला पैण चर्मणा चोविसम्पि चिण्वरा तिथयरा मे पश्यन्तु कितीय वन्दे मया जय लोकसोत्तमा सिद्धारुक बोहिलापं समाय वर्मुत्तं दिन्तु चन्देषु निमलयरायचि स्वयं पयसैरा सागरवर्गम्भिरा सिद्धा सिद्धि मम दिसन्तु लोकसौचकरे तमतिथैरे चीणे अरिहन्ते कितैसि चौविसम्पि केवली उसभमज्यं च वन्दे सम्भवम् अभिनन्दं च सुमयं च पमप सुपासं च क्षीणं च चन्दप वन्दे सुवें च पप्तन्त सियलसिञ्जन् स वासुपूज्यं च विमलमणन्तदमं सन्ति च वन्दामि कुन्तु अरञ्चमल्ली वन्दामि रिठनेमि पासन्तः वर्धमानं च एवमयि अभिथुवा विहुरयमला पैण चर्मणा चोविसम्पि चिण्वरा तिथयरा मे पश्यन्तु कितीय वन्दे मय्या जय लोकस उत्तमा सिद्धारुक बोहिलापं समाय वर्मुत्तं दिन्तु चन्देषु निमलयरायचि स्वयं पयसैरा सागरवर्गम्भिरा सिद्धा सिद्धि मम दिसन्तु चौथो लोकसूचकरे तमतिथैरे चीण्यन्ते कितेसि चोविसम्पि केवली उसभमज्यं च वन्दे सम्भवमभिनन्दं च सुमयं च पौमप सुपासं च चिणं च चन्दप वन्दे सुयं च पप्तन्त सियलसिञ्चन् स वासुपूजं च विमलमणन्ततमं सन्ति च वन्दामि कुन्थु अरञ्चमल्ली वन्दामि रिठनेमि पासन्तः वर्तमानं च एवमयि अभिथुवा विहुरयमला पहिण चर्म चोविसम्पि चिणुवरा तिथयरा मे पश्यन्तु कितीय वन्दे मह्या जयलोकस उत्तमा सिद्धारुक बोहिलापं समाय वर्मुत्तं दिन्तु चन्देषु निमलयरायचि स्वयं पयासैरा सागरवर्गम्भिरा सिद्धा सिद्धि मम दिसन्तु ચાર લોકોનો કૌશલ કર્યો હતો તેમાં કાનો માત્ર મીંડું પદ અક્ષરગાથા સૂત્ર ઓછું અતિ વિપરીત ભણાણું હોય આપને સંભળાણું હોય કે ઉચ્ચારણ અશુદ્ધ થયા હોય તો અનંતાશ્રી કેવલી ભગવાન આપની સાક્ષી તસ્સમિચ્છામિ તુકડમ નમો અરિહંતાણમ નમો સિદ્ધાણમ નમો આયર્યાણમ નમો ઉપજાયણમ નમો લોય સફસાણમ નમો અરિહંતાણમ.
Namo Orientanam. So that was the fifth essential. The sixth is to take pachkan, take a vow. Samaik and Pratikraman is partly about setting limits and limiting your attachment to things. And to reduce your attachment, you should take a vow for one day until tomorrow, end of tomorrow, for something that you really cherish. There's no point taking a vow for something you don't like. So think of something you really like. If you're addicted to Coca-Cola, do not drink Coca-Cola for a day. Okay, and we will give you the pachkan for that.
તારણા પ્રમાણે ચોવીયમ આહારમ પચકામી અસડમ પાણમ ખાયમ સાયમ અન્યથા ભોગેણમ સહસા ગાણમ મહતરા ગાણમ સહસ સમાયવતીયા ગાણમ અપાણમ વસિરામી.
Pranam Vosirana. That is the end of Pratikraman. So we have done our 48 minutes, and now to finish the Pratikraman, we will say the vow of Samaik again, with all the blemishes that we may have done, and say Tasmichami Dukram for that.
દ્રવ્ય થકી સાવચોક સેવાના પચકાન ક્ષેત્ર થકી આખા લોક પ્રમાણે કાળ થકી બે ઘડીની સામાયિક કરી હતી અને તે પૂરી થતા પડાવું છું અને પાડું છું એવા નોમાં સામાયિક કરતા પંચયરા જાણ્યાના સમાયરા તંજાતે આલો મંટપ્રિયાએ વૈતુપ્રિયાએ કાયતુપ્રિયાએ સમય અકરણાએ સામાયસ અવટીયસ કરણાએ તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ સામાયમ સમમ ન કાયમ ન ફાસ્યમ ન પાલ્યમ ન તીર્યમ ન કીટિયમ ન સોયમ ન આરાયમ આણાય અણુપાલય ન ભવઈ તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ. સામાયિકમાં 10 મનના 10 વચનના 12 કાળના 32 દોષમાંથી કોઈ દોષ રાખ્યો હોય તો તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ. સામાયિકમાં આહાર સંજ્ઞા પય સંજ્ઞા મૈથુન સંજ્ઞા પરિગ્રહ સંજ્ઞામાંથી કોઈ સંજ્ઞાનું સેવન કર્યું હોય તો તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ. સામાયિકમાં પુરુષ કથા ભક્ત કથા દેશ કથા રાજકથાનું સેવન કર્યું હોય તો તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ. સામાયિકમાં અતિક્રમ વ્યતિક્રમ અતિચાર અનાચાર જાણતા અજાણતા મન વચન કાય કરી કોઈ દોષ લાગ્યો હોય તો તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ. સામાયિક વ્રત વિધેય લીધું વિધેય પાળ્યું વિધેય કરતા અવિધેય થયું હોય તો અનંતાશી કેવલી ભગવાન આપની સાક્ષીએ તસ્સ મિચ્છામિ તુકડમ. સામાયિકમાં કાનો માત્ર મીંડું પદ અક્ષર ગાથા સૂત્ર ઓછું અતિ વિપરીત ભણાણું હોય આપણે સંભળાણું હોય કે ઉચ્ચારણ અશુદ્ધ થયા હોય તો અનંતાશી કેવલી ભગવાન આપની સાક્ષીએ તસ્સમિચ્છામિ ત્રિપુરम्. નમો અરિહંતાણમ નમો સિદ્ધાણમ નમો આયર્યણમ નમો ઉવૈશાયણમ નમો લોય સફ સવણમ નમો અરિહંતાણમ નમો સિદ્ધાણમ નમો આયર્યણમ નમો ઉવૈશાયણમ નમો લોય સફ સવણમ નમો અરિહંતાણમ નમો સિદ્ધાણમ નમો આયર્યણમ નમો ઉવૈશાયણમ નમો લોય સફ સવણમ એસો પંચ નમોકારો સવ પાવપણાસણો મંગલાણમ ચ સવેસી પરમં હવૈ મંગલમ.
Namo Orientaram. That's the end of Pratikraman. Quite painless, as you can see. If you give us 2 minutes, we'll set up and there's a short lecture on rag or attachment. And then those of you who want to go to Bhavna next door, that will start in about 45 minutes to an hour. So 2-minute break and then we'll do the lecture. So I'm going to do this for about 45 minutes. Happy to take any questions. If you have questions, please let me know. So we're going to talk today about rag. Rag means attachment. Sometimes we call Bhagavan Mahavir with rag or without attachment. And that should tell you that attachment is the thing that is the most difficult thing to let go of, but it is necessary in order for spiritual progress. So Bhagavan Krishna in the Gita, chapter 2:27, there's seats up here as well. Thank you. So in chapter 2:27, he says that in life, the only certainty is death. I may not know what happens to any of you tomorrow, but I can tell you at some point, you and me will all die. And when you look at that person who has died, you notice that there is a difference in them from when they were alive. And the difference is that whatever was inside them, whatever their fuel, whatever their energy, whatever their consciousness, has left. And without that, the body has no use. It doesn't move, it doesn't do anything, and what do? We cremate it, because it is of no use. And that tells us that this body is made up of 2 things, not one. There is the one that will be cremated, that you will leave behind, and there is the energy or the consciousness or the Atma, whatever you call it, that will go. The question is, where does it go? And that where depends on what? It depends on your karma. And what does your karma depend on? Your mind, your speech, and your actions. Out of these, everybody can hear you and see your actions, but nobody knows your thoughts. So even though 2 people might look exactly the same, do the same things, be of the same nature, their thoughts may be entirely separate. And that means that their karma is entirely different, because you bind the same karma in your thoughts that you do in your speeches and your actions. So you don't have to harm anybody, you just have to think about harming somebody, and you bind the same karma. So, if that is the case, what are the chances that 2 people have the same karma at death? 0. That means that you and everybody that is known to you, dear to you, you cherish, are not going to go to the next place together. So your saband, your hold, your attachment is of this, let's say 100 years, let's be generous. Out of this planet having human life for 300,000-400,000 years, you're here for 100 years in this form. Okay? So when you were born, this life came into you, into this body. Where did it come from? It could have come from anywhere. It could have come from heaven, from hell, from plants, from animals, but it came into you and made you this person. When it made you this person, it also did two things to you. It made you ignorant. By ignorant, I mean, if you think about this idea of birth, birth is a very painful process. And if it is painful for the mother, then you can also be sure it's painful for the child. Yet, can any of you remember your birth? The second is that this life is not your first life. It's a life that has been going on forever. You cannot create an Atma, so you have to assume that at some point, for billions of years, you've been going through this cycle. Can you remember any of your last lives? So what happens in that ignorance? What happens is you start with your first attachment, which is this body. And you assume that this is who you really are. Even though I'll sit here and tell you that this body will one day die and you will carry on, you're still 99.9% attached to this body. And that means that you are, in this ignorance, going to keep perpetuating this cycle. Because whilst you're in this body, you will bind karma. That karma will give you another life. In that other life, you will also be ignorant, and you will keep going through this again and again and again. But the problem that there is that this body has a number of things that it does to you. The first is the body is attached to a family. So that they become my family. So my attachment is now not just me, but everybody that I think is connected to me. Even though I have just explained to you that at the end of this life, it is unlikely that you will see them in your next life. But this body is attached to them. My mother is the one that gave birth to this body, etc., etc., etc. The second thing that happens is that this body lives in a house, my house, drives a car, my car, has a job, my work. So this idea of I and my is in everything that you do. They're all your attachments. Now, what do attachments do? What is the problem with attachments? The first thing that attachments do is that they come with a sense of pride. You know, look at my family, how we are, you know, I live in such a nice house, this car is. And those attachments and that pride then leads to the passions we call dvesh. That you have just purchased this new car and somebody scratches it. Are you going to say it's a piece of tin? I'll just get another one. Or do you get angry and you say, you know, why my car and who does it, and why wasn't he driving? So now you have taken those things that are physical. In the case of a car, will probably stop after 4 or 5 years and be scrapped. And yet you're now attached to them. And that attachment is not just the anger. It's the pride, it's the jealousy if you find somebody with a better car, it's the hatred if somebody does something to the car, it's the greed of saying, next time I'm going to get a bigger car. I've got this big model, I want the bigger model. All of these things are linked to things that you're attached to. If you think about your children, they have to come first in class, they have to be the smartest, they have to be the most respectful when guests come home, they have to, you know, have other talents. They're your children. But are they your children? Or are they other souls sharing this life with you? And then think about the second thing that this does. The second thing is that through these attachments, you give away the one thing that you spend your whole life trying to do. If I ask all of you, what are you trying to do? You'll always say, be happy. If I get this promotion, I'll be happy. If I buy this house, I'll be happy. If this happens, I'll be happy. That happiness is always one day away, tomorrow. Because you're always thinking, if I do this, this, and this, I will get this, and I will be happy. I'll save my money all year, I'll go on this big holiday, I'll be happy. You go there and it's raining every day. So the problem is that you have now given up your happiness to your attachments. How many of you will be happy if your kids fail their exams? But if they pass their exams, you're happy. So your happiness is no longer on you, it's on them. Your happiness, not theirs. But you have no control. Are you writing the paper for them? Are you doing the revision for them? Are you making sure that they are ready? No. But your happiness depends on it. So you have now just given up the one thing that you think your aim in life is to these things where you have absolutely zero control. And in giving that up, you spend your life doing this. One day up, one day down, depression, anxiety, I've got so much stress. If there are two kids and both fail their exams, one isn't yours, but they failed their exams. So, poor kid, hope he does better next time. The other one is yours. That's it, shouting, tears, how could you do this? The only difference between those two kids, they have a body, they have a soul, they did the same exam, is you feel an attachment to one. And because you feel an attachment to one, whatever happens to that boy or girl happens to you. If they fall over and get hurt, you're sad all day. And this means, because don't forget what I told you, every word, every thought, every deed binds the same karma. So through other people's actions, you are now binding karma. How? Because when it happens, what's the first thing that you do? You react. Somebody pushes your child over, you become angry. You react. Karma. Is that karma going to benefit that child? Is it going to give you another life? Simple equation. If you come out today and see somebody's parked carelessly and touched your car, karma. And then you multiply that karma. Why? Because you have to phone all your best friends and tell them this is what happened. And then you have to add some masala to that, some more karma. And then you come back tomorrow and you find that somebody scraped their car and you think, yes, serves them right. More karma. How much karma are you binding out of this one little thing? And all that karma is only going to do one thing. It's going to give you another life. Okay? So, if you then think a little bit about what the opposite of this is. Let's think a little bit about this karma and opposite. So, Bhagwan Mahavir did one thing, which we call Samyak Darshan. Samyak Darshan means that at some point you realize your soul. You get a little glimmer. That glimmer is a bit like if you look today outside, it's very cloudy, you don't see anything. But if in the clouds there was a little break and a ray of sun came through, it would completely change your attitude towards what was there. I could tell you that there is a sun there, it's bright, it's yellow, it has lots of light. The moment you see that ray, you start to understand. This is what Samyak Darshan does to you. When you feel a little bit of it, everything that you keep reading, Hu Atma Chu, this is Atma, becomes real. It's no longer a theory or some religion. It's a bit like if you're a Hindu and every day you're praying to this idol called Krishna, and one day he descends in front of you. Everything will change. It's the same thing. You see your Atma, everything changes. Because at that point, this is not the most handsome, the most beautiful, the most, physically fit body. This is a prison for that Atma that you think you now are, or you know that you are. Until then, it's theory. And the reason we keep doing what we do, Pratikraman, Puja, Arti, reading scriptures, Swadhyay, the purpose is to keep building good karma again and again and again. So at some point, it suppresses the bad karma. Enough for this little ray of light to come through. As soon as that little ray of light comes through, your world changes. And that change means that you're now no longer, this body. This body is a prison for the soul that you are. It's a fundamental change. And the people who actually get that always do one thing, or typically do one thing. At some point, they end up taking Diksha. The reason for Diksha is that it is the way in which you can remove your attachment, vitrag. Today, you have nothing but attachment. That Pratikraman focused so much on limit your things that you eat, limit the things that you don't need, parigraha, all the sinful acts of overeating and all these things it removes in one go. So it is the path, and the path is about reducing attachment. That is his only purpose. So let's think about that a little bit. Today, if you had to list your possessions, you'd probably need a book, a big book, by the time you finished everything that... We have this habit that we go on holiday, and as we're walking past, we think, oh, that's nice, and then we buy it, and we buy others, and then we come home and we put them on some shelf, and then after 10 years, somebody says, oh, that's nice, where did you get that from? Like that, we accumulate, we possess. What do sadhus have? One piece of cloth that they have to beg for. Where are your possessions? Where are your attachments? You've automatically removed them. You then think about your family, your friends, and everything that you feel attached and loved with. You become a sadhu, what happens to all of that? You even change your name in some cases. You're now on your own. But you're happy being on your own because you're with this thing inside, not with this thing outside. Fundamental change. Then you think about this, that if you have no possessions and you have no attachments and no name, how can you have ego? How can you have pride? What can you be jealous about? If you see something you like, you can't have it. How can you have greed? You have one piece of cloth. And then when you think about this ego that we have, just imagine what would happen to that ego if every day you have to put your hands together, knock on a door and ask for food. It doesn't matter how rich or poor that person is, you're begging for food. That's what you do. It is the easiest way to kill your ego. Because at that point, you can't be bigger than anybody. You have to rely on other people's goodwill and good wishes to actually give you something. You then think about this idea that you have to walk barefoot from place to place. No mobile phone in my pocket, no credit cards. What if something goes wrong? How can you have fear? This what if something goes wrong doesn't exist. Because you believe in what's inside, which says that if my karma is there, it'll happen, and if it's not there, it won't happen. That's it. And so you don't actually worry about things because you assume and you know, at the point that you reach that level, you have mainly good karma. So only good can happen. Nothing will happen. Now, you think, well, that's not the same for us. But let me ask you something. If you think back the last 10 years, how many times have you been so worried about something and then said, oh, thank God that didn't happen. I was so lucky. It happens constantly. We keep thinking of all the things that would happen that could be bad, but in reality, that's the only place they happen. But whilst we're entertaining them in our heads, we're binding karma. If we had this thing called faith, not that it won't happen, because we don't know, it depends on the karma, but that whatever happens, we'll handle it. It's a bit like this. If you don't know how to swim, and you're standing on a beach, every wave you worry about in case it'll pull you in. And once you're an expert swimmer, what difference? If you fall in, you'll swim back. So you never worry about it. You enjoy being on the beach. The only difference is that. So if you spend your life worrying, in most cases, that worry won't lead to anything except all the imagination and all the scenarios you've built up there. In this scenario, what's the point of it? They're going from place to place. They don't have a phone. They've got nobody to call. Whatever happens, they'll deal with it. End of story. So suddenly your fear goes. So your ego is gone, your pride, your jealousy, your hatred, your greed, and your ego. And what happens through that process? As they become better and better and better at this process, they start climbing the spiritual ladder to a point where there's one thing that we haven't really talked about, which is today we also believe that the thoughts that we have, the ideas that we have, are ours. Now, if they're yours, where did they come from? Something to think about, that if these things in your mind are yours, I just had a thought. You just had a thought. Where did it come from? These thoughts, if you ever think about this idea that your Atma has karma on it, how does that karma give you an effect? If that karma is because at some point you were angry and you bound that karma, you now have angry karma. So what that karma does is that it rises and gives you a thought. That thought makes you angry. So now you have a cycle. That anger means you take it and bind it again because you're now angry. So this is how cycles work. If you get to the point, and what do we do when we meditate? What do? We say, if a thought comes, let it go. Because they're not yours. At the point where you're able to disassociate yourself even from your thoughts, it means you've given up, and your thoughts will be little passions, little flickers of things you like, you don't like, whatever, that keep coming to you. At the moment you can say, they're not mine, I'm not reacting to them. That's the key word in this, reacting. Because what happens is that you can do two things with anything. You can act, which is what you want to do. You think about something and do it. Or you can react, which is something that happens to you because you see something or something else outside happens. When you react, that is the cycle of karma. When you act, you can act with your own power, with your own intention. So it doesn't necessarily bind that karma. So in this scenario, the point at which you can disassociate yourself from those thoughts becomes the time where you're free. And if you think about Bhagwan Mahavir's life, for the 12 years that he took from taking Diksha to getting to Keval Gnan, what did he do? He meditated. Wherever he was, whether he was standing or sitting or going anywhere, he meditated. the purpose of that meditation was to disassociate himself from his thoughts. Because today, few of you will say something. Fear. That if I speak up, if I ask at the end of this, does anybody have questions? Most of you will, but won't want to ask them, just in case. You might look stupid, people might not take you seriously, so you don't do it. If you really want to go home, you think, what will people think if I get up and walk out now? Won't really do it. But you'll sit and think about all these things. So most people live most of their lives in this imaginary world. And in that imaginary world, because there are no rules or limits, they sit and make up scenarios. If this happens, or if I had said this, or if that person had done that, and you lead this life. Now, in that, there are two interesting things. The first is that you're leading this life somewhere else, whilst your karma is being bound here. So you're not even present when you're binding your next life. And the second thing that happens is that whatever you sit and imagine, there's no benefit to you, except that you've got more karma. So this is how you sit and build and acquire. Mahavir Bhagavan, for those 12 years, sat and detached himself from every thought. Once the thoughts stopped coming, because if they come and you're not attaching yourself to them, they go. That means they haven't bound back. And you keep doing this. It took 12 years, so this is not a simple process. At the end of 12 years, they stopped coming because he didn't have any. He'd run out. And at that point, he became Kevagnani, all-knowing, because there was no clouds around his Atma. So, I want to give you some time to ask questions. So, let me summarize this for you. If you spend your life being attached and over-attached to everything, just bear in mind one thing. Everything in life is temporary. You are temporary. The body is, because that body will get cremated. If everything is so temporary, what are you gaining out of attaching yourself to it? The second thing to think about is that in those attachments, the stronger they are, the more you're giving up all of your happiness, all of your passions, all of your likes and dislikes, because they now depend upon this thing that you've tied yourself to. And what then happens is that you spend your life suffering because of them. See, I give you a simple example. That you see parents who have kids, as the kids grow up and then go to university or whatever, what happens to them? That this attachment suddenly becomes, a bit of loneliness or a bit of despair. The only reason is that, they'd lived that whole life as if the kids were always going to be kids. But they're not. And in this way, that attachment will always lead you to despair and karma and more despair and more karma. So, what is the answer? The answer is really twofold, which is if you spend your life, consciously cutting things. So, for example, a simple example, if you buy a new shirt, donate an old shirt to charity. Keep it the same. You can't wear more than one shirt anyway. So, keep this idea of things being mine and, the best thing ever and whatever. Forget all that. This is here for you to use here and now. Tomorrow, who knows if you're here. So why worry about tomorrow? Live your life in the present. So this is the first thing. Cut your attachments. Limit them. All these things that we try and do, if you think of Ambel, what's Ambel? Restrict your food eating. What's Upvas? The most essential thing for your body, restrict it. We, as Jains, we spend our whole lives doing things to try and limit our attachment to things. Why is attai considered such a big thing? Because for 8 days, you've given up the thing that's most essential for your body. For 8 days. So the idea is, and freely give it up. Today, I'm giving that up. That's it. This way you will find that you start to become somebody who is happy internally, not happy on something happening tomorrow or the day after. The second thing you have to do is this. In the space in which something happens, whatever it is, between that space, that thing happening, and you reacting, there is a little gap. You have to use that gap. If you stop reacting, because your reaction has no value anyway. If you get angry, tomorrow you'll regret being angry, but you've bound the karma. Then you have to come here to say, I'm sorry, I'm angry, forgive me. If you stop that reaction, just by using that gap, something happens, take a deep breath, pause, let it happen. And then think about it, and then say what you want to say, do what you want to do. If you can do that, you stop the cycle. Because there's no automatic, this happened, you reacted, it's going to happen again. So you cut your burden. And the third thing, which is very important, is that as human beings, we have one characteristic over every other type of animal. We can discriminate. We can see right from wrong. We can judge things. We can think about things and see if they're right. Learn to use this. It is not always that you're right and your kids are right and this is right and that's wrong. Learn to use it. In that discrimination, you will stop thinking of everything as my thoughts, my this, my that, whatever. And you see, and if it's wrong, say sorry. If you take the 3 traits of a sadhu, become humble, because that's what you are, egoless. Become somebody who is disciplined in what they do, not careless, not, whatever, and follow a path that isn't about accumulation and ego and being better than everyone. Over time, what you will see is that the things that make you spiritual, that are linked to your Atma, start to become more and more inside of you. You become more compassionate. You treat people as equals, not somebody inferior or below you. And you don't want to cause harm to anything. These things are what your Atma is anyway. If you start that behavior, then you start becoming like your Atma. Over time, you will realize it, and that ray of sunshine will hit you. So I'm going to stop. We have 15 minutes for questions. So please ask me questions.
Yeah, regarding this Pratikraman, this YouTube has Pratikraman, it says, how Pratikraman. So when I do that, I feel I've done so much. એમાં બધું આવી જાય?
So the purpose of Pratikraman, so we do Pratikraman as a ritual, and we try and cover every possible type of error so that it covers everybody. But you should really, really, in your mind, have a habit that if at any point you think you've done something wrong, you should just stop and say, Michami Dukram. Because at that point, you have the right bhav. You have the right, you've just done something, you know it's bad. With that bhav, you're saying, I'm really sorry, Michami Dukram. But you have to mean it. It shouldn't be, you just say it, and in that, what it does is that it means that the karma you bind becomes slightly weaker. So it'll come off easily, less. And so this idea of Pratikraman, we should do it ritually, that's fine. But, every day you make 5 mistakes, you should 5 times stop and say, Michami Dukram. In your mind, that's fine. Because in some cases, you know you'll have done something bad, but it's not even necessary that the other person has heard you. But you know what you've said is bad. So stop and just say, I'm sorry. That behavior over time will mean you say it less and less. You do it less and less. Because you know it's wrong. You'll stop, and over time, you just won't do it.
So એ લોકોને કે સવારમાં તમારે એકવાર કરવાનું રાતના એકવાર કરવાનું.
That's the ritual Pratikraman. Yes. એટલે એ તો સવારનું હોય, રાતનું હોય, પછી
હોય પણ એમ કે
yes.
10 મિનિટમાં એ okay.
Yeah, and then there is Paki Pratikraman hoy, every season there is a Pratikraman, Samvatsari hoy, but it covers different periods. But what I'm saying is that that's okay, but you should get into the habit of realizing કે આ ખોટું છે, વિચારની દુઃખ. એટલે એમાં પાપ છે ને અડધો થઈ જાય. Yes.
You said sadhu, when they take, I mean, the common men, they take diksha and they become unattached, they leave the attachment. But I heard recently so many times that even the sadhus and santos says that you don't have to leave the house to become unattached or things like that. You can be unattached in your own house too, with your thinking and with your lifestyle. Isn't it true?
So, as Shvetambars, we believe that it's possible. Digambars don't believe it's possible, but we do. And we always point to the fact that Bhagwan Rishabdev's mother, Maru Devi, got Keval Gnan as a householder. I think that is true theoretically. In practical terms, if today you have a house, you're worried about the electricity bill, the broadband, there's a problem with the roof. All these things become things that you have to follow. And as a result, it's very difficult to lead a life where you have no attachment to this. It's the same with, everything else, that if you have kids, you have to worry about which school they're going to, whether they've done their homework. It's normal. Very difficult to do, by saying, I'll do it, but I don't really care what happens after that. Because you do. So this is why this idea, and one of the titles given to Bhagwan Mahavir was Nirgranth. Nirgranth, Granth is house. Nirgranth is houseless. Because he was without a house, family, possessions. And that is normally seen as the way. So theoretically, yes, but practically, very difficult.
Yeah, I can understand it's difficult to do that, but if somebody puts their minds on it, say for example, you're talking about kids and stuff, but all this passes over for my age or 60s, 70s, whenever, when they retire. So I'm sure it's less attachment to so many things than before they were young, they had so much, but afterwards realizing, learning, listening, so attachment gets less and less.
So what do people worry about when they think about retirement? They worry about the value of the pensions, what they're going to do with their time. You see, this is what I'm saying, that all of these things are linked to attachment. And the thing that it's a little bit like this, that if you stayed at home and signed up to the Open University, can you get a degree? Yes, eventually. But if you went to university and studied every day, you'll get it in 3 years. That's the difference. One is possible, the other is the path designed to make it happen.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
We have time for one more. Come on, one more question. Okay.
So why don't we take Diksha then? You think we are all attached and we want to
Yes.
do more karmas
And we haven't
and have another life?
we haven't yet experienced our Atma, and so we theoretically believe it's there. We kind of keep saying Hu Atma Chu, but
Yes.
we haven't got to the point where we've realized it, and so we can't give up this body because we don't know if it's there or not. We haven't seen it. The point at which you see it, it becomes obvious. And that's the difference, typically. So, one more question, yes.
જ્યારે કોઈને હેલ્પ કરીએ like there's one auntie who lives near my house and હું એને કંઈક she's 90 plus અને હું કંઈક કરી આપું ને તો એ તરત જ મને કંઈક પાછું વાળે in some way or other એટલે એ કે પછી કરમ ન બંધાય પણ then this cycle goes on મેં કર્યું એને કર્યું again.
No. So what they do, a lot of people I see do this.
બહુ કરે એવી રીતે.
That what they do is say, if I have taken from you, I have an obligation. Okay, you know. So if I can turn it round, I also give you something, so the negative and positive become zero.
પણ પાછું કર્મ બંધાય.
It's like be karma bandai. When it becomes net is zero. That's what they try and do, balance it.
So attachment is not bad as long as it is good attachment.
No, it's like karma. It's like karma. Good karma is better than bad karma. But if you want moksha, then you have to have no karma.
No, like you have to come here.
Yes.
You agreed to come here and do this.
So this is better than me sitting at home watching TV. So this is good, better attachment than that attachment. But ultimately, it's still attachment. But you see, if you can't take diksha, it is always good to do punya than pap, because the punya at some point will suppress your karmas. Because if you can't get rid of them, you should suppress them. So their effects is less. And that's what this is. So tomorrow it's the same time. I hope you're all coming. The topic for tomorrow is bhav. Because if everything happens in your mind, as it does, your bhav is everything. So we're going to do that. And then after tomorrow, the last one is on Friday. Saturday it's Samvatsari, which I hope you're all going to. So on Friday, we're going to talk about Shamapna and who does it benefit. When you go up and say to somebody, Michami Dukram, is it for you or is it for them? So we'll talk about that. Okay? Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Michami Dukram.